Miss, you need to stand up. That seat isn't yours. No, we're boarding. The cabin air hummed low and steady, the kind of sound that pressed into the ears. Overhead bins clicked shut. A flight attendant paused halfway down the aisle, eyes fixed on a small girl in the window seat of row 3. Lena Brooks didn't move. She was 10, knees tucked in. Backpack hugged her chest like a life vest. Sunlight from the tarmac cut a bright line across her sneakers. The boarding chime sounded again, 2 notes, polite and impatient. I'm assigned here, Lena said, voice soft, careful. She lifted a paper boarding pass with both hands, as if it might tear if she breathed wrong. The pilot stepped closer. Captain Mark Harlan. Gray hair, pressed uniform, a badge that caught the light. His shadow fell over the girls' table. This seat is reserved, he said. You'll move to the back. A murmur rippled through the first-class cabin. Someone coughed. Someone else whispered, too loud, is she alone? Lena glanced down the aisle. Her mother was still at the gate, finishing paperwork with an agent. The gate door was open. So close. The smell of jet fuel drifted in, sharp and metallic. I didn't do anything, Lena said. Her fingers tightened on the boarding pass. My mom said wait. Captain Harlan didn't look at the paper. He looked past it. There's a policy, he said. This seat belongs to someone important. The word landed heavy. Important. Lena's eyes flicked to the empty seat beside her. Cream leather. A folded blanket. A small card tucked into the seat pocket. Thick, ivory, edged in gold. She had noticed it earlier, curious but afraid to touch. I can hold it, she said. I won't bother anyone. The flight attendant shifted, uncomfortable. The boarding chime sounded a third time. The jet bridge door began to close with a hydraulic sigh. Stand up, the captain repeated, quieter now. We're done. That's when a phone camera lifted 3 rows back. A red light blinked on. Somewhere, a woman whispered, this doesn't feel right. Lena swallowed. The hum grew louder. Her heart beat in her ears. She slid her backpack to the floor and stood, small in the aisle, her seat suddenly too big without her. As she stepped aside, the ivory card slipped from the pocket and fell. It landed face up. Captain Harlan froze. For half a second, no one breathed. And in that silence, something shifted, something that would change this flight, this crew, and everyone watching. Enjoying this? Tap subscribe for tomorrow's story.
The ivory card lay on the carpet like it had weight. Captain Mark Harlan stared at it longer than necessary. Long enough for the flight attendant, Rachel Moore, to notice. Long enough for 2 passengers to lean into the aisle for a better look. Lena didn't bend to pick it up. She stood exactly where the captain had directed her, hands at her sides, eyes forward. Her mother's voice echoed in her head, stay polite. Stay still. Don't argue with uniforms. Rachel cleared her throat. Captain Harlan, should I? I've got it, he said quickly. He stooped, scooped up the card, and slid it into his jacket pocket without reading it. Too fast. Too practiced. Then he turned to Lena again, his expression reset. Row 32. Middle seat, he said. You'll be more comfortable there. Comfortable. The word drew a quiet, bitter laugh from somewhere behind them. A man in glasses shook his head. Another passenger whispered, She's a child. Lena took a step down the aisle. Then another. Each step felt heavier than the last. The carpet changed texture as she crossed into economy. The light dimmed. The air felt warmer, thicker. Behind her, the jet bridge door sealed shut. Rachel hurried after her, lowering her voice. Sweetheart, I'll help you stow your bag. It's okay, Lena said. I can do it. She lifted the backpack overhead with effort. It bumped the bin before sliding in. When she sat, her feet didn't touch the floor. Up front, Captain Harlan returned to the cockpit, jaw tight. He closed the door harder than needed. The cockpit latch clicked, a sharp, final sound. Rachel paused in the aisle, glancing between first class and the back rows. She had seen seat disputes before. Upgrades. Arguments. Entitlement. But this felt different. The way the captain had avoided that card. The way he'd said someone important. A vibration buzzed in her pocket. Her phone. A message from her sister, boarded yet? Rachel didn't answer. She looked back toward row 32. Lena stared straight ahead, blinking fast. 2 rows up, the woman who had lifted her phone earlier, Evelyn Carter, late 50s, neat scarf, calm eyes, kept recording. She zoomed in on the cockpit door, then panned slowly to the empty first-class seat. Policy, Evelyn murmured to herself. We'll see. The engines began their low growl. Safety announcements crackled to life. Buckles clicked. The plane pushed back from the gate. Lena pressed her forehead to the window. The terminal slid away. She wondered if her mom would notice the seat change when she boarded another flight later. She wondered if she had done something wrong without knowing it. Up front, Captain Harlan loosened his tie and stared at the instrument panel. The ivory card burned in his pocket like a warning. He told himself this was routine. That discretion mattered. That not every detail was for passengers. But there was one thing he hadn't told anyone yet. And as the plane turned toward the runway, that unspoken detail waited, patient, quiet, and powerful. If you want the full truth, hit like so this story reaches more people. The plane lifted smoothly, a gentle rise that pressed everyone back into their seats. Applause flickered and faded. The cabin settled into a practiced quiet. Lena counted her breaths the way her teacher had taught her. In for 4. Out for 4. She kept her eyes on the wing, steady and silver against the clouds. A man beside her shifted, glancing down. You okay, kid? He asked softly. Yes, sir, Lena said. She always said sir. It made adults relax. He nodded, but his eyes followed her feet that dangled above the floor. He said nothing more. Up front, Rachel moved through first class with a tray of drinks. She paused at row 3. The seat was still empty. The blanket untouched. The gold-edged card was gone. Captain expects someone? A man asked, lifting his newspaper. Yes, Rachel said. The word came out automatic. Then she hesitated. At least, that's what I was told. The man raised an eyebrow. Strange way to hold a seat. Rachel forced a smile and moved on. 3 rows back, Evelyn Carter lowered her phone for the first time since takeoff. Her heart was still thudding. She replayed the moment in her head, the girl standing small in the aisle, the captain's tone, the cards slipping free. She opened her notes app and typed a single line, row 3. Card. Captain reaction. Evelyn wasn't impulsive. She'd spent 30 years as a middle school principal. She knew when to wait. And she knew when not to. The seatbelt sign chimed off. People stretched. Overhead bins opened and closed again. Normal flight noises. Normal routines. But something itched at Rachel's thoughts. During her break, she slipped into the galley and checked the passenger manifest on the tablet. Row 3A blocked. No name. No status code she recognized. Just blocked, do not assign. That was unusual. She scrolled further. There were policies for crew rest, air marshals, last-minute upgrades. This matched none of them. Rachel swallowed. In the cockpit, Captain Harlan's co-pilot, Daniel Reed, glanced sideways. Passengers settle okay? Yes, Harlan said. Reed hesitated. You moved a kid. Harlan didn't answer right away. He adjusted a knob that didn't need adjusting. There are reasons, he said finally. Not everything is for discussion. Reed nodded, but his eyes flicked to the captain's jacket pocket. The slight bulge. The outline of a card. Back in economy, Lena opened her backpack and pulled out a folded worksheet. Math problems. She traced the numbers without seeing them. Her stomach tightened as turbulence rattled the cabin. A drink card bumped her knee. Sorry, sweetheart, Rachel said gently. It's okay, Lena replied. Rachel handed her a cup of apple juice and a packet of cookies. On the house. Thank you, ma'am. Rachel paused. What seat were you assigned? Lena reached into her pocket and unfolded the boarding pass. Rachel read it once. Then again. Row 3A. Rachel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cabin temperature. I'll be right back, she said. She walked quickly to the galley, heart pounding. She looked again at the manifest. Looked again at the boarding pass number she'd memorized. They matched. There was no mistake. Rachel leaned against the counter, steadying herself. Policies mattered. Documentation mattered. And this didn't line up. Out in the cabin, Evelyn lifted her phone again, not to record, but to message her son, watching something unfold. Might need advice. The engines droned on. The plane cut through a layer of cloud and burst into sunlight. And somewhere between the cockpit and row 32, the truth waited, quiet, undeniable, and closer to the surface than anyone realized. Comment justice if you believe she deserved justice. Rachel didn't return to her jump seat. Instead, she stood in the galley, tablet in hand, staring at the manifest like it might change if she blinked. Blocked, do not assign. No initials. No authority code. Just a digital wall where a name should be. She tapped into the policy index. Her fingers moved faster than her thoughts. Crew rest, no. Air marshal, no. Medical transport, no. VIP charter, definitely no. Her pulse climbed. She stepped into the aisle and caught Evelyn Carter's eye. Evelyn tilted her head slightly, a question without words. Rachel nodded once, small, careful. Rachel moved forward and knocked on the cockpit door. A pause. Then a click. Captain Harlan opened it just enough to see her face. Yes? I need a word, Rachel said. About row 3. Harlan's jaw tightened. Later. It can't wait, she said. Her voice stayed respectful, but firm. There's a documentation issue. Behind him, Daniel Reed glanced up. He'd heard that tone before. It meant trouble. Harlan stepped out, closing the door behind him. The hum of the engine seemed louder in the narrow space. Say it, he said quietly. The child's boarding pass lists row 3A, Rachel said. The seat is blocked without a policy code. I checked. Harlan's eyes flicked down the aisle, then back. I made the call. With respect, sir, Rachel said. Calls require backing. If there's an authority. There is, Harlan cut in. Then we need it logged. For a long moment neither moved. Passengers nearby pretended not to listen. Pretended badly. Harlan reached into his jacket and pulled out the ivory card. He held it between two fingers, like evidence and like a threat. This, he said, is above the cabin. Rachel leaned closer. She didn't touch it. She read the embossed seal. Her breath caught, not from recognition, but from precision. This wasn't a casual note. This was deliberate. Sir, she said carefully, this doesn't override a paid assignment without a code. Harlan's eyes hardened. You'll do your job. I am, Rachel said. A voice drifted from behind them. Calm. Clear. Captain, may I ask a question? Evelyn Carter stood in the aisle, phone lowered at her side. She smiled politely, the way she had in 1,000 parent conferences. Is there a safety concern with that child? Harlan bristled. Ma'am, please return to your seat. I will, Evelyn said. After you answer. A few heads turned. Someone whispered. What's happening? Harlan looked down the aisle again, toward row 32. Toward Lena, sipping apple juice, unaware she was the center of a tightening circle. There's no safety concern, Harlan said. Evelyn nodded. Thank you. She turned and walked back, phone rising as she sat. The red light blinked on again. In the cockpit doorway, Daniel Reed cleared his throat. Captain, if there's no code. Harlan slid the ivory card back into his pocket. I'll handle it. Rachel held her ground. Then I need to document that you overrode assignment without policy. Silence stretched. The plane hit a small pocket of turbulence. The seatbelt sign chimed on. A collective inhale. Harlan leaned in, voice low. You don't know who that seat is for. Rachel met his eyes. Then tell me. He didn't. And in that refusal, something shifted again, subtle, irreversible. The kind of shift that draws lines and forces choices. Type yes if you want to see all targets hit at once. The seatbelt sign stayed on longer than necessary. Rachel returned to the galley, but she didn't sit. She opened the incident log on her tablet and stared at the blank field labeled description. Once she typed, there was no erasing it. She knew that. Captain Harlan knew it too. She hadn't typed yet. In row 32, Lena traced circles on the condensation of her juice cup. The turbulence had passed, but her shoulders stayed tight. She glanced toward the front, wondering if she'd be called again. Wondering if she'd done something wrong twice. Evelyn Carter pretended to read the in-flight magazine. Her phone rested against her thigh, recording only audio now. She had learned long ago that cameras changed behavior, but silence sometimes revealed more. Up front, Captain Harlan stood at the cockpit window, staring at nothing. The ivory card pressed against his ribs. He remembered the morning meeting. The brief, clipped instruction. Seat must be kept open. No questions. No delays. He had nodded then. He had not asked why. Daniel Reed broke the quiet. "Mark, this is getting visible." "I know," Harlan said. "Then maybe explain." Harlan turned. "And say what? That I followed an instruction without a code?" Reed held his gaze. "Or that you displaced the child because she was convenient?" The word landed hard. Harlan exhaled through his nose. "You think this is about convenience?" "I think," Reed said carefully, "that whatever this is, it's not worth your career." That struck something. In the galley, Rachel typed one sentence, then deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. Her fingers hovered. She looked toward row 32 one more time. Lena caught her eye and offered a small, brave smile. That did it. Rachel began to type, slow, precise, factual. Passenger assigned row 3A displaced without documented policy. Ivory authorization card presented without manifest code. She saved it. The tablet chimed softly. Entry logged. Timestamped. At that exact moment, a notification buzzed Evelyn's phone. A text from her son, a civil rights attorney in Chicago. "If there's documentation and a minor involved, keep recording. Don't engage." Evelyn's jaw set. Rachel walked back to the cockpit. "Sir," she said evenly, "the incident is logged." Harlan closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them, something in his expression had changed. Not anger now, but calculation. "Fine," he said. "We'll address it after landing." Rachel didn't argue. She knew what after landing meant. Time. Distance. Silence. But time had already started working against him. In economy, a man leaned into the aisle and whispered to his seatmate. "That girl was in first class." "I saw," the woman replied. "Didn't sit right." Across the cabin, phones tilted. Screens glowed. Not many. Just enough. Harlan returned to his seat and stared at the flight clock. 90 minutes to Dallas. 90 minutes for things to spread. And there was one thing most people missed, one detail he had counted on staying invisible. The person that seat was meant for wasn't on this plane. Not yet. Share this video so communities understand what was hiding. 90 minutes later, the wheels touched down in Dallas with a low, solid thump. Applause broke out, scattered, relieved. The seatbelt sign stayed on. The cabin leaned forward as one, eager to stand, to move, to leave this strange tension behind. Captain Harlan remained seated. He stared straight ahead as ground control crackled through the speakers. His hands rested on his thighs, fingers stiff. Daniel Reed glanced at him, then at the clock. "You okay?" Reed asked. Harlan nodded once. Too quickly. In the cabin, Rachel stood by row 3, posture formal. She wasn't sure why she'd chosen that spot, only that it felt right. The empty seat seemed louder now, like a question that refused to be ignored. Lena waited patiently in row 32. Her mother, Grace Brooks, had boarded a later connection and was already on her way to meet her at baggage claim. Lena imagined her mom's smile, the way she always crouched to eye level when asking questions. Evelyn Carter saved her recording. She hadn't posted anything. Not yet. She believed in timing. The seatbelt sign chimed off. Before anyone could stand, the cockpit door opened. Captain Harlan stepped into the aisle. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice steady but tight, "please remain seated. We have an arrival adjustment to complete." Murmurs rose. A man checked his watch. A woman sighed. Rachel felt her pulse spike. From the forward galley, a gate supervisor stepped onto the plane, followed by a man in a dark suit with an airport badge clipped to his lapel. He scanned the cabin, then looked directly at row 3. "Captain Harlan," the man said. "We need to speak." Harlan nodded and stepped aside. The supervisor leaned in, whispering. Harlan's face drained of color. "What?" he said too loud. The supervisor repeated herself, quieter this time. Rachel caught fragments. "Boarded late, private transfer, owner." "Owner." Harlan turned slowly, eyes finding the empty seat again. "That's not possible," he said. "He wasn't on the manifest. He wasn't meant to be," the supervisor replied. "Until he was." Evelyn leaned into the aisle, listening. So did half the cabin now. The suited man cleared his throat. "Sir, the individual assigned to that seat is the aircraft's majority owner. He was rerouted last minute. He's arriving on the next inbound." Silence fell like a held breath. Rachel's mind raced. Owner. Not a celebrity. Not a politician. Something else. Someone who didn't need to announce himself, because the system bent before he spoke. Harlan swallowed. "Then why displace the child?" The supervisor hesitated. "You were instructed to keep the seat open." "That's not an answer," Rachel said. The suited man shifted. "The instruction assumed flexibility." "Flexibility," Rachel repeated softly. Evelyn's phone was up again. Recording. Harlan turned, scanning the cabin. His gaze landed on Lena, small, patient, watching the adults argue over rules she hadn't broken. A realization hit him, sharp and unwelcome. The seat hadn't been taken from Lena because of policy. It had been taken because it was easier to move her than to risk offending power. Harlan straightened. "Get the owner's representative on the phone," he said. The suited man blinked. "Sir?" "No," Harlan said. Rachel felt something crack open. Not relief. Resolve. In the aisle, Grace Brooks appeared at the front door, breathless, scanning the rows. Her eyes locked on Lena. "Mom," Lena said, standing. Grace hurried down the aisle, scooping her daughter into a hug. "What happened?" she whispered. Lena shook her head. "I waited." Grace looked up, meeting Rachel's eyes. "She was assigned first class," Grace said. Not a question. A statement. Rachel nodded. Behind them, Captain Harlan lifted the intercom phone. His hand trembled, just enough to notice. "This next part," Evelyn murmured to herself, "changes everything." Captain Harlan held the intercom phone like it weighed more than it should. "Get me the representative," he said again, slower now. "Put it on speaker." The suited man hesitated, then nodded and stepped into the galley. A moment later, a voice crackled through the cabin speaker, smooth, controlled, distant. "This is Thomas Keller," the voice said. "Executive liaison." Rachel felt the cabin lean in, collectively. Even the restless passengers stilled. "Mr. Keller," Harlan said, "I need clarity. The seat was blocked without code. A minor with a valid assignment was displaced." A pause. Long enough to notice. "Our understanding," Keller said, "was that the seat could be held without disruption." "There was disruption," Harlan replied. "To a child." Another pause. This one sharper. "Captain," Keller said, "you were following instruction." Harlan closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, his voice was different. Steadier. Clearer. "I was," he said. "And that instruction was wrong." A ripple moved through the cabin. Someone inhaled audibly. Grace Brooks tightened her arm around Lena's shoulders. Lena leaned into her, eyes wide but calm. Rachel felt her throat tighten. She had never heard a captain speak like this, publicly, plainly. "Mr. Keller," Harlan continued, "this plane flew with an empty seat while a child sat separated, confused, and embarrassed. That choice was made without policy backing. I won't own it alone." Silence crackled over the speaker. Evelyn Carter lowered her phone just enough to watch faces. This was the moment. She knew it. The kind of moment people later asked about. "Were you there?" Keller spoke again, slower now. "Captain, we can discuss internal handling off-air." "No," Harlan said. "We'll discuss accountability now." A murmur of agreement swept the cabin. Not loud, but unmistakable. Rachel stepped forward. "The incident is logged," she said, "with timestamps." Another pause. Grace Brooks lifted her chin. "My daughter followed every rule," she said. Her voice didn't shake. She waited. She listened. She trusted adults. Lena squeezed her mother's hand. "That trust was broken," Grace continued, "by people who thought power mattered more than fairness." The words landed. Hard. Keller cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we regret." "Don't," Grace said. "Fix it." Harlan felt something settle in his chest. He looked down the aisle, meeting eyes, Rachel's, Evelyn's, Daniel Reed's. Even passengers he'd never see again. "This flight will not deplane," Harlan said, "until corrective steps are acknowledged." The suited man's eyes widened. "Captain." "I said acknowledged," Harlan repeated. Another silence. Then a new voice joined the line. Older. Measured. "This is Samuel Wright," the voice said. "Chairman." The cabin went still. Rachel's breath caught. Evelyn's phone trembled slightly in her hand. "Captain Harlan," Wright said. "I've been briefed." "Yes, sir," Harlan replied. "There will be a written acknowledgement," Wright said. "And a review." "Immediately." Grace exhaled slowly. "And the child?" Wright asked. Harlan looked at Lena. "She should never have been moved." "Agreed," Wright said. "Ensure she receives a personal apology." A weight lifted, but not completely. Because apologies were words. And consequences were something else entirely. As the call ended, the cabin buzzed low with disbelief. Phones tilted again. Messages flew. Rachel knew this wasn't over. Not even close. Because now, the truth was out in the open. And once that happens, the fallout never stays contained. The cabin doors stayed closed for another 20 minutes. Not because of weather. Not because of mechanics. But because once words like review and acknowledgement are spoken out loud, systems slow down. Carefully. Protectively. Airport operations requested statements. Corporate compliance asked for timestamps. A supervisor asked Rachel for her tablet. She handed it over without hesitation. Captain Harlan sat back in his seat, uniform suddenly heavy on his shoulders. Daniel Reed stayed beside him, silent but present. "You did the right thing," Reed said quietly. Harlan didn't answer. He was watching Grace Brooks and her daughter. A uniformed customer relations officer approached them in the aisle. "Ms. Brooks," he said, reading from a tablet. "On behalf of the airline, we—" Grace raised a hand. "My daughter doesn't need a speech." The officer stopped. "She needs to know," Grace continued, "that rules mean something. That adults don't bend them when it's convenient." The officer nodded, chastened. "Understood." Lena looked up. "Can we go now?" she asked. Grace smiled at her. "Soon." Behind them, Evelyn Carter finally ended her recording. She had captured enough. More than enough. She began typing, not posting yet, just writing. She chose her words the way she always had with parents: calm, factual, impossible to dismiss. Child displaced from assigned seat. No policy code. Empty first-class seat. Admission on speaker. She saved it as a draft. Rachel stood near the galley, answering questions from 2 supervisors. Her voice stayed even. She cited policy numbers. She pointed to the manifest. She did not speculate. That mattered. By the time the cabin doors opened, the story had already moved beyond the plane. Outside, phones lit up with notifications. Group chats buzzed. One short clip, just audio, had been sent, then forwarded again. No faces. Just voices. Calm. Clear. Uncomfortable. "I won't own it alone." That line stuck. At baggage claim, Grace knelt and zipped Lena's jacket. "You okay?" she asked. Lena nodded. "I was scared," she said. "But people listened." Grace hugged her. "That's because you matter." Across the terminal, Captain Harlan was pulled aside by management. He listened. He answered. He did not argue. Rachel received an email before she even left the building. "Please be available tomorrow morning. Compliance review." She expected fear. Instead, she felt steady. Evelyn Carter sat in her car for a long moment before driving away. Then she posted. Not a rant. Not a call out. Just facts. Within an hour, the post crossed 10,000 views. And with every share, the question grew louder. If this happened in public, on a plane full of witnesses, what else was happening quietly? 3 days later, the email arrived at 6:42 a.m. Rachel Moore read it twice before the meeting settled. No disciplinary action will be taken. Your report was accurate and appropriately filed. Thank you for upholding company standards. She sat at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around cooling coffee, and let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Across the city, Captain Mark Harlan stood in a quiet conference room with glass walls. The review panel sat opposite him, 3 executives, neutral expressions, folders neatly aligned. "You acted outside instruction," one of them said. "Yes," Harlan replied. "I also corrected it." Another flipped a page. "You escalated publicly." "I acknowledged harm publicly," Harlan said. "Because it happened publicly." A pause. "The child?" the chair asked. Harlan didn't hesitate. "She was treated unfairly." Silence followed. Then a nod. "You'll receive a formal reprimand," the chair said. "Not for the correction. For the initial decision." Harlan accepted it without argument. Later that afternoon, Grace Brooks received a call. Not from customer relations. Not from a scripted apology line. From the chairman's office. There were no promises of headlines. No dramatic gestures. Just a clear statement: policies were being revised. Blocked seats would require documented authority codes. Any displacement involving minors would trigger automatic review. Grace listened. Then said, "Good." That night, she sat with Lena at the kitchen table, homework spread between them. "Mom?" Lena asked. "Did I do something important?" Grace smiled softly. "You did something brave." "I just waited," Lena said. Grace brushed her hair back. "Sometimes that's enough." Across town, Evelyn Carter watched comments scroll past her post. Thousands now. Many angry. Some grateful. A few reflective. She replied to none of them. She had said what needed saying. And the system, slow, imperfect, had moved. Not because of shouting. But because people had refused to look away. 6 months later. The airport in Dallas hummed with its usual rhythm: rolling suitcases, soft announcements, the smell of coffee drifting from somewhere just out of sight. Lena Brooks walked beside her mother, backpack snug on her shoulders. She was a little taller now. A little steadier. The world hadn't changed overnight, but she had. They stopped near a large window overlooking the runway. A plane taxied past, sunlight flashing off its nose. Remember this place? Grace asked. Lena nodded. The waiting. Grace smiled. Yes. The waiting. A man approached them unhurried. Captain Mark Harlan, no jacket this time, just a simple shirt and tie. He stopped a respectful distance away. Ms. Brooks, he said. Lena. Lena looked up at him. He met her eyes, not over her head. I owe you an apology, he said. Not the kind written for me. My own. Lena listened. I made a decision that hurt you, Harlan continued. I won't forget that. Lena thought for a moment. Then nodded. Okay. Grace watched, heart full. Harlan stepped back. I hope your flight today is smooth. As he walked away, Rachel Moore passed through the terminal, rolling her bag. She spotted Lena and waved. Lena waved back, smiling wide this time. Nearby, a small sign stood at the gate counter, new, easy to miss. All seat changes require documented authorization. Evelyn Carter sat at a cafe table, newspaper folded beside her. She watched people move, ordinary and unremarkable. She took a sip of coffee and closed her eyes, satisfied. Lena slipped her boarding pass into her pocket. Row 3A. She didn't look nervous this time. She just walked forward. If this shocked you, comment truth below. Yendi, thanks for watching.